It's a big pleasure having Rebecca O'Brien here with us, and she has prepared some special stuff from the shooting of the film I, Daniel Blake. But I would like to briefly remember our first meeting, because it was the day when you early morning have received a phone call from Cannes Film Festival that the film is selected, and also that was the day when you in the evening was screening the film to Ken Loach for the very first time. So you were pretty nervous. And then I have to say one small detail stayed in my mind, that your colleague came to the office and you wanted to go for coffee, and she started to find these cards where you collect stamps, and if you have 10 stamps you get one coffee for free. And then I had the feeling I'm in the film of Ken Loach, that it's not only about some kind of intellectual perspective, but it's really like the way how you live in your work, everyday life, and I feel very comfortable.
We're very sad, normal people, really. I think that's the truth of the matter. Yes, and we certainly didn't expect that the film that you see us making here would go on to win the Palme d'Or, and it was just an extraordinary experience. And it's really lucky, because my whole mission in making this documentary, I had a different plan when I started to make this film. My plan was to Ken had a big archive of all sorts of boxes from his memoirs and things from making films for over 50 years. And my plan was to make a digital project, an online project, where people could explore Ken's archive interactively. So this is what I wanted to do. And what happened was Arte in France said, yes, we love this idea, we will give you money to make an interactive project. But nobody in the UK would help fund this project. They said to me, oh, you have to make, we don't have money for digital projects, you have to make a documentary. So I thought, okay, I'll make a documentary. So I still wanted to do my digital project, but I needed fuel for the digital project. So they said, go and make a documentary. So I found a director. I was told, go and find a director, make a proper film. And this is the film that you've just seen. So I'm very happy with this film. I think it is a good portrait of the Ken Loach that I know and love. And I still made the digital project, which is what I want to show you just briefly here. Because we got money from Arte, and I still wanted to find a way to let people discover the work that we have done over the years, and to do it online. So it would reach an audience that doesn't normally go to the cinema. So we took the rushes and all the footage that Louise shot on this film, and we gave it to an editor-director in France, and they came up with this wonderful project, which is available now online, and it's called How to Make a Ken Loach Film. So it's different from the biography that you see here. The project is about the different processes that we use in the creation of Ken's films, because they're different from how people make films. So I just would like to show you a little bit from the digital project, which you can find either as an app for your iPad or your iPhone, and it's called How to Make a Ken Loach Film. Anyway, hopefully we might be able to have a look at it. Talk amongst yourselves. Maybe you could like to talk while I'm making it happen.
What was the first reaction of the film when Ken Loach saw this portrait, before you find it?
Yeah, Ken, Louise and I were extremely nervous of showing this film to Ken, because Ken is the most critical audience you can ever imagine. Everything is controlled by Ken. You can see that in the film. You can see that he is, has a great deal of control. So Louise and I were shitting ourselves, really nervous, and we had to watch the whole film with Ken Loach. And he started, as we were watching it, he started to laugh. He laughed at himself. And so then we knew that we were okay. And in the end, he was very generous, and he said how much he enjoyed it. So what it is, just so that in case we can see it, what it is, it's like a making of I, Daniel Blake. So we take the audience through each stage of the process of making the film. So the script, the casting, the production, the editing, and all the different stages of production. And then, so it's like a making of film. And then after that, but as you watch each stage, you can then explore further and look at old films that we've made, so that you can, see different examples from when we've made other films. So, like if we discuss the casting of I, Daniel Blake, we then look at the casting of The Wind That Shakes the Barley. So it's just a way of opening up the subject to a wider audience. And you can watch the whole thing through. It's like another film. It's like a different process of how we make films. So anyway, have a look at it online, because it's worth having a look. How to make a Ken Loach film. Anyway, that was the reason I made the documentary. So I've made two things. I've made the documentary, which is a biography, obviously, of Ken, and how to make a Ken Loach film, which clearly cannot be seen in the cinema, but can only be seen online.
Well, maybe techniques start to work soon, but before it works, can you tell us when did you met for the first time, and when did you decide to be a producer, or he chosen you? How the story begin?
Well, back in the 1980s, I did some work for Working Title. I produced a film for Working Title. I worked for them as a location manager, and then because I'd produced a film with somebody else, they thought maybe I would be capable of doing something for them. So I actually produced a TV series for them in Ireland. And so because I did a TV series for them in Ireland, I was their Irish expert. And they were going to do a film with Ken in Ireland. This was my wonderful opportunity, because they asked me to produce the Ken Loach film. And I was thrilled, because I had been a huge admirer of Ken for many years. But he had disappeared. This was the late 80s. He had disappeared off the map. He had been making these political documentaries, and it wasn't a success. But I was thrilled to have the opportunity to work with him. So we started work on this film called Fools of Fortune. And the problem was Ken was trying to make a film that was much more political than Working Title wanted. They wanted a romantic story, and Ken was trying to make it into something more like The Wind That Shakes the Barley. So what happened was, 4 weeks away from shooting, we got sacked. So I had no job, Ken had no job, and I never made the film with Ken Loach. But he did have a script, and he asked me if I would be interested in... We got on very well, and I was willing to throw out my plans of how you do production in a normal way. I was willing to throw that away and do what Ken wanted to do. And so we got on very well. And we eventually, it took us a couple of years, we made a film called Hidden Agenda. And that went and won a prize in Cannes. And so Ken was back on the map. So it was a good thing that we worked together. It was a difficult film to make, but we made it. We felt excited about the fact that we had made it, and it put Ken back on the map. And then, of course, during the production, I had a child after the film, and so we were out of sync for a few years. But in the meantime, I was preparing what became Land and Freedom. So, and after we did Land and Freedom together, we did everything more or less after that.
I realized when I went through the awards from Cannes Film Festival that since you met him for the first time, he started to receive awards. So you bring him big fortune. But, you know, for me, Ken Loach is a strong personality, and he's this kind of director which is speaking and thinking through camera. You know, this generation from 60s, it's something very special that for filmmakers who started their career at this time, they continue till today making films all the time, like Alain Resnais, Jean-Luc Godard, many Czech filmmakers from this period. Why is it so? Because, for example, at some younger filmmakers, I sometimes don't see such a passion and trust in cinema.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I think that if you find your voice in cinema, like the directors you're talking about, then why would you want to do anything else? If you can succeed in this arena, which allows you to find a way of speaking loudly and making political statements, or, I mean, it's such a joy if you can command this cinema which has so many moving parts. If you can find a way of controlling it by harnessing a team and making the team powerful and work well, then you create something which is more than the sum of its parts. And then you find, how could you possibly want to do anything else? That's what I feel about filmmaking. If you can succeed in it once, then you keep wanting to do it again. And it's really interesting to me to see, 50 years ago, Ken made Cathy Come Home, and it had a political impact in Britain. It alerted people to the homelessness that was taking place in Britain. And 50 years later, he has made a film which I think, in I, Daniel Blake, suddenly, which opened in the UK last weekend and in France yesterday. And the response, the immediate response on social media and in just on every area of the media, we are finding a really, really powerful response. And people are recognizing themselves in the film. They're recognizing that this film tells a story about them, and they're taking ownership of it. And you find that something, perhaps again we can be politically powerful, and the film will say something to future audiences. So I think I see them almost like bookends of Ken's career. He still has this power.
And do you think that the reason, maybe when you were talking about this political issue, that this generation connects filmmaking with political statements, maybe this is also the reason?
I think that a whole generation, certainly in Britain, a whole generation have been almost silenced with the neoliberal plan. I think that Margaret Thatcher swept us off our feet, and the capitalist project was continued by John Major and then Tony Blair in Britain. And these people you know, they thought that they had the answer to everything, and then till suddenly in the late 2000s there was a big crash, and you could see that this isn't capitalism isn't something that works forever, and I think, but a whole generation seemed to be swept up in this idea that life was good and we were all going to be rich. And I think the truth of it, you know, when the money starts to run out, the truth of it begins to show. And you discover that people have been lost in this me generation where it's all about yourself, the individual, rather than community. And I think what I feel is that something that Ken has been saying all along, and why he's been unpopular with a lot of people, is that he's been saying something which people had closed their ears to. And it's interesting, in this last year, 500,000 people have joined the left-wing Labour Party. Mm-hmm. So it's like suddenly people are waking up and saying, hang on a second, that system doesn't work. Maybe we should try something else. So there is a positive moment. And Ken has been battering away at that all the way through. And I really admire that. I really admire the humanity of the work that he's done.
If you have questions, just raise your hands, please.
Já chci poděkovat za tento dokument. Jsem rád, že je tady paní producentka a měl bych dotaz, pokud se nemýlím, tak všechny filmy Kena Loache mají na začátku logo britské národní loterie. Nevím, co to je, jak se finančně podílí na vzniku tohoto filmu, ale než mi odpovíte, tak já se ještě podělím s jednou historkou, a sice letos po vítězství v Cannes filmu Já, Daniel Blake, jsem byl na festivalu v Locarnu a tam jsem ráno kolem 9. hodiny v davu objevil hlavního představitele, Davea, který měl sebou 10letého syna, kterého chtěl provést po městě, a protože bylo horko, syn žádal zmrzlinu, tak šli hledat, kde se dá koupit zmrzlina. Ale mezi tím ho identifikovalo strašná spousta filmových nadšenců a Dave dával podpisy, fotil se, a já jsem pozoroval toho synka, který se děsně nudil, děsně mu to bylo protivné, že ten jeho tatík je taková velká filmová hvězda, ale pochopil jsem, že Dave je přesně ten typ člověka, který je hlavní postavou toho filmu. Protože Blake taky v tíživé životní situaci pomáhá druhým a nemyslí na sebe. Tak to jsem jenom chtěl sdělit, tak jako Marek měl svoji historku, a teď jenom k té národní britské loterii. Děkuji.
So in Britain, thank you for that nice story about Dave. In Britain, to make an indigenous film, one of the only ways to do it is to get some public funding from the British Film Institute, and the films are funded by the National Lottery. And that was something that came in after they stopped funding it from a direct public source. Because there is a economic flaw certainly in Britain, the films do not receive money from the box office. Money from the box office goes to the exhibitor who is showing the film, and then a bit goes to the distributor, and the distributor and the exhibitor have to make an awful lot of money before the producer gets anything. So it's very difficult to make money if you are a producer at the box office, so you can make more films. So to get things started, there has to be a public trigger, and that's the same in many countries. And so, and in I think in John Major's reign, the National Lottery was invented, and the money was to go to make films and to do big public projects. So that is why the films are financed by the National Lottery. And every time somebody buys a national lottery ticket, I'm very grateful to them because they help me make the films.
Thank you. Here's the question.
Hi, I also thought the film was wonderful. I'd like to ask if, as the actors get pages of script as they go, if there are no rehearsals before filming, or does Ken Loach do a lot of takes? And also I'd like to ask you, what is your favorite Ken Loach film?
It's difficult to have a favorite child, isn't it? No, it's difficult to have, of your own, it's difficult to have a favorite film. I do secretly have my favorite films, but I wouldn't tell you. But no, I like some of the films for different reasons. But rehearsal process, which is very beautifully shown in our digital project, the rehearsal process is usually what we do is the actors, once they are cast, we will give them tasks or jobs which are related to what the person in the film would do. So if you're a teacher, we'll send you to teach for a week, or if you're a nurse, you have to go and work in a hospital, or if you are joining the militia in the Spanish Civil War, we will give you a military boot camp for 2 weeks with your comrades, and we will give you political lectures on the situation. We will make you sing every night together, so that by 2 weeks, when 2 weeks is over, you can handle a gun and you are friends with all the people around you, and so that you form a proper bond with people. So the other thing we do is we do little improvised scenes that with the actors which are related to the story, but they're not the story. So they're related to the character. So we just make it easier for them to relax into doing the part. So Dave in I, Daniel Blake, he has to learn how to do some carpentry. We don't give him any computer training at all in the film. So it's just that. It's simply that.
There is a question.
Dobrý večer. Zvažoval Ken Loach někdy zahrnout do svých filmů problematiku Evropské unie, která se pravděpodobně dotýká té komunity, kterou v podstatě ve svých filmech sleduje?
I think that would be a bit boring. I think there are many more interesting things than a film which is Brexit means Brexit. I think it's too horrible to contemplate. My feeling is that a lot of dust needs to settle before we know what on earth is going on. It's a disaster. From most people who work in the film industry in Britain think it's a complete disaster. And we really, I think it's difficult to say, because the thing is, a lot of the people like Daniel Blake would have voted to leave, because it was like a protest vote against the rich, against the empowered, the entitled, and those people like Daniel Blake have been forgotten. And I think that it's a misplaced protest vote against the government. So in a way, maybe I, Daniel Blake is a Brexit film. It's interesting, but I found that I've had to do nothing but talk about Brexit ever since it happened, and nobody knows what it is yet. Very depressing.
I would like to ask, because in the film which we have seen, there is this episode related to the film Kathy Come Home.
Kathy Come Home.
Yes, and there is an information that BBC turned down twice the shooting. And you know, in Czech Republic, BBC is representing like the best broadcaster ever. So this is pretty shocking information. Can you tell us more about the situation and the reasons why they didn't want to continue in the shooting?
I think the BBC were frightened of the political side of it, and I think Ken was also trying to make something very different. He was shooting on locations, and he was shooting with real people, and I think the BBC didn't really think that this could be done. I think they were concerned that it was too much like a documentary, and that it was the blurring between whether it was the documentary or whether it was fiction was too much for them to contemplate. This is a very different period. There were only 2 channels then, and half the country watched Kathy Come Home. And there was a big debate afterwards. Is this real? Is this film came on after the news? Is this still the news? So it was very controversial at the time, but it changed politics.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any questions?
Hello. A question from England. Is Jeremy Corbyn Ken Loach's man?
Yes, simply, I think that Ken does see that Jeremy Corbyn, who's the new left-wing, the first left-wing Labour leader we've had for a very long time. He got elected because there wasn't really an alternative, and the right wing of the Labour Party didn't manage to field a candidate, and Jeremy Corbyn won. And not only that, he won. He got a huge number of members to join the Labour Party in his first year in opposition, and Ken has known Jeremy for many years because he's been in Parliament for a very long time. And so it's really quite strange because he's just an ordinary MP to us, and suddenly he's the leader of the Labour Party. And actually, the thing is, he's not actually really, really hard left. He's just a socialist. And actually, this is a good opportunity to test the waters and to see whether it is possible to run a socialist opposition. So Ken even made a video for Jeremy Corbyn when he was running for election, and you can find that on YouTube. So Jeremy Corbyn is definitely Ken's man.
Thank you.
Any other question?
In the film, there were scenes from the shooting and organizing, etc. And it seems that you work in a very small crew. Is it like it doesn't look like standard European production, even like independent production? That it seems like extremely small. I mean, you live 10, 15 people. Is it possible, or was it just?
This is a very interesting question, because that's the point. How we do it is the point, and that's why I wanted to show you the digital project, because one of the things we do, actually there's a crew of about 50, and what we do is we hide people. So we want to make the situation on set feel really like reality. On set, you will literally have the camera, so the camera person, you will have the focus puller, you will have the boom operator, you will have Ken hiding behind a door, the continuity script person will be hiding under the camera, and the sound recorders will be out of the room, the first AD will be out of the room, everything. I'm sometimes on a pair of earphones out of the room, and everybody is chucked out so that it can feel really like, and people have been, our crew are trained to really disappear into the background, and it works because, and we don't have the caravan, we don't have the lots of people with, we don't have the. We will use a church hall or a community centre to be where we we put the actors together and we dress everybody. So we have everything. We have catering. We have everything that a normal crew has, but we hide it round the corner. When we were making Land and Freedom, the Spanish invented a word for how you had to be on a Ken Loach set. The word was amatojarse, which means make yourself like a bush. So I have hidden behind countless tombstones in cemeteries, bushes, corners, and if Ken spots you, he'll put his finger and he'll go like that. Because if he can see you and the actors can see you, then it's not a good idea. So that's how it is, and it's really important to get something to feel real is to make it be real as closely as possible. So, like, I remember the first time I worked with Ken on Hidden Agenda, we weren't allowed to shoot in the north of Ireland because it was politically very dangerous at the time. But we did. But we did some scenes in London. But we actually put on a plane. We got all these Sinn Féin supporters onto a plane so that they could be extras in our party scene because we wanted it to feel real. I was amazed that I was importing Irish people to London. But that was what you did, and the lengths we go to make it real are incredible, and I love that. I mean, for me, it's great fun to make something like that. It was so shooting in sequence, not letting the actors see the script, or a little bit at a time. We give it to them a little bit at a time, not keep secret any surprises so that you get a real, genuine reaction when something surprising happens. And the actors love working like that. They really do. Because they shoot in... So not only do the actors experience the film unfolding in sequence, they live the story, but the crew does as well. When we film something like in The Wind That Shakes the Barley, there's a scene where the Cillian Murphy character has to kill this boy who has been a traitor. And it's a boy that he's got to know. Ken has carefully made it so that he looked after the boy during the shooting. And so it becomes a real tragedy that he has to actually shoot the boy. And the whole crew was depressed. You know, it's like everybody is affected by the story. And so we're all, not just the actors, but the whole unit is experiencing the film. So it's like living the story. So I've lived all these films.
If you can tell us more about your position as a producer, because we could see that you are there during the shooting, you are even there when the screenplay is read between you and the director and the author. So how do you influence developing the story and the film?
I don't know. I'm just there. I mean, sometimes I wonder what it is a producer does, but I think the best explanation is that I'm like the first audience for the film. My job is to really be there as a sounding board for each different process that we go through. So if we are developing the script, I'm just part of the conversation. So the film is made in different stages, and at each stage there is a more important person. So the script is being written, the writer is important, the casting is being done, the casting director is important, the editing is being done, the editor is important. But I'm there all the time. So I'm not in the room all the time, but at any crucial point when decisions are being made, I will be around and I will be available to discuss things with Ken, and I'm just like a sounding board. Is this a good idea? I'm part of the conversation. Obviously, I have an actual job, which is, it's my job to raise the money, and it's my job to spend the money. And so...
You mean legally?
Legally, if I can. And then it's also my job to police the marketing and all the other, the presentation of the film. Somehow I'm much more involved at the very early stages than at the very end. But in the middle, my job is being an audience and just trying to because Ken is so, the director who has tunnel vision and is trying to get through the day and trying to get through the work that needs to be done. And so my view is more from, it's more a lofty view, like I am like an audience, really.
If there is no other questions?
There's one there.
Uh-huh.
Hello. I would like to go back to the previous question or your answer about the acting process. It reminded me a little bit of Miloš Forman's earlier movies, the Czechoslovakian New Wave, and I saw that you show two of his films, the Love of One Blonde and the Concourse, I think it was. And so I wonder if you watched any Czechoslovakian New Wave movies, or if Ken wanted you to watch any, and how much inspiration he took from them.
I think they are his primary source. They're his primary inspiration. I think he was amazed by the Czech films of Forman, and I think, it was a real revelation, the fact that you saw people reacting naturally, and he wanted to make films like that. In his archive, I discovered a little notebook, and in it is like a sort of manifesto that he wrote in the 60s, which says, and the rules are very much the same as the Czech New Wave, and he was brought to that by Chris Menges, the cameraman that he worked with on those films in the 60s. And Chris had studied the Czech New Wave and had worked out how it was done. And the naturalism was absolutely like gold dust for Ken. So he absolutely always puts those films as his main influence. Bicycle Thieves of De Sica, Gilles Pontecorvo's Battle of Algiers, those are other influences. Those are also films that I loved. I suppose he never said to me, you must watch these films. I discovered them and I watched them. And for me, from a personal point of view, I just really love seeing people like they really are. And so that was my inspiration to work with Ken, was to be able to make these films that seem to capture true life instead of... And the problem is, once you've made a Ken Loach film, it's very difficult to make other people's films because they just feel so contrived. And I love other films. I love musicals. I love, like Ken, I love musicals. I love all sorts of different cinema. But I find it quite difficult. They really have to, I have to suspend my disbelief. And with Ken, I never have to worry about that. I believe the film from the beginning. And I love cinema. I love big cinema. But working with Ken, I think, is really such a revelation because he really does find a way of making it true. And it's thanks to the Czechs.
It would be great if you do a political musical.
Well, we did, actually. Jimmy's Hall is sort of a political musical, but people found it was a bit lightweight for us, a bit soft, so they didn't go and see it very much. Maybe we should do a remake of Les Miserables or something like that. But I'd love to make a musical. But funnily enough, we've been asked if there's been a couple of theatre companies have been in touch with me asking to make musicals out of Jimmy's Hall and The Angel Share. So watch this space. There may yet be Ken Loach musicals.
And is there any film you're working on now?
I'm still working on I, Daniel Blake, because it's opening now. And as a very protective producer, I like to be really kept in touch with every stage. So I'm still working on it. I'm actually doing another documentary with Louise, who directed Versus. I think she's a really talented filmmaker. She kicked me out she didn't let me too close because I'm so close to Ken. So even though it was my idea to make the film, she didn't let me into the cutting room until she had a cut. So it was really fantastic for me when I saw this for the first time, because I actually really did like it, and I was really relieved that it would be okay. No, we'll never see it.
Let's find it online.
Yes.
Any questions from the audience? Okay, the last one.
Já bych si dovolil otázku na vás oba dva, protože tady na festivalu se promítá film Tony Erdmann, ale nepromítá se tady Já, Daniel Blake. Oba filmy soutěžily v Cannes a před vyhlášením výsledku byl favorizován právě film Tony Erdmann, ale nakonec Zlatou palmu dostal Blake. Jak byste to okomentovali oba?
Well, I know that Tony Erdmann, I've seen it. It's a wonderful film. It's very funny, but I know that the strange thing in Cannes is that the press, the journalists, always think they know who's going to win, but they never get it right. They have these special charts with all their stars and things, and never ever do they get it right. Well, maybe once or twice. And I know that the jury attended the screening of I, Daniel Blake the night before they screened Tony Erdmann, and I know that the jury were at the big main screening of I, Daniel Blake when there was like a 10-15 minute standing ovation and the audience were weeping. So I think they might have been swayed by this reaction. And I think people laughed and enjoyed Tony Erdmann, but I think they were genuinely moved by I, Daniel Blake. And I think it was... And the thing also with the Cannes jury is that they are often actors and directors. And I think that the performance of Hayley and Dave really genuinely moved them. And I think maybe that is why... I think that and I've spoken to some of the jury since we won, and I think that was what swayed it. The journalists love Tony Erdmann because it's very funny and it's very clever. But I think that it was just the rawness of I, Daniel Blake that swayed the jury. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, for me, I just want to add that we screened this film because we screened all three films nominated for the Lux Film Prize. So that's the reason why Tony Erdmann is here and I, Daniel Blake, not, because both are fiction and we are mostly documentary festival. But for me, personally, is Ken Loach's film much closer. Even I love the sentence which is in Tony Erdmann, one woman character said, I love countries, it's middle class, it makes me more safe. I feel more comfortable in these countries. So this is strong statement, yeah. But the film you did is really going very analytical through the system, yeah. It's not about few characters, but it's adapting the system, and this is for me very strong. And when I saw the then at the end of the film that you write that you thank a lot to some members of the union, and you can name them, but they helped you a lot. I was very curious what kind of help it was.
In I, Daniel Blake, well, we got a lot of support from people in the services that, you know, the people who represent workers at the Department of Work and Pensions. So we did proper research. We met a lot of people so that we wanted to verify every story, and we got a lot of help from the unions, because they support people who have to carry out these terrible tasks of sanctioning people. I mean, it's difficult to talk about the film if you haven't seen it, really, but it will be here. We have sold it here. It will be coming to the Czech Republic before too long, I hope.
Any other question? If not, thank you very much for being here with us.
Thank you very much.
All of us will check the online portal. I'm sorry for the technique.
I'm sorry too, because we spent a long time trying to rehearsing it and getting it perfect, and then of course on the night it fails. That's theatre for you.
But we had more time to talk to you, so that was nice. And we will now try to find your iPad.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.